Hi there. Well, the sun god has abandoned us. Perhaps Kent has transgressed his will, or it's just a cloudy day in Britain. I'd like to touch on a couple of concepts, essentially agendas and war, or in specifically being anti-war. And I think it's fair to say that I'm anti-agenda, but I'm not anti-war. I'm not a pacifist. That doesn't mean I like war or I want to go to war. But the problem with being anti-war as a position is that it stops you thinking. It immediately skews your analysis. And at the end of the day, my interest is in analysis, and my overriding value or quality or thing that I'm looking for in life is fair. So I don't want anything to get in the way of that analysis. And of course, when we see things like people apologizing, like, I don't support Putin's aggression, but, we see the apologists for, oh, well, I'm not really for him, I'm actually against him, but, maybe he's got a reason. It's equivocation. And I prefer clarity. And again, people can be very selective. I'm anti-Putin, I'm anti-Russia, I'm anti-this war, but not Iraq or Afghanistan. And do we really want to be anti-World War II? Well, if somebody can figure out how to go back and have Hitler not take power and mobilize the German indignation at Versailles, their non-defeat in the First World War, because that's essentially at the root of the issue. They didn't feel they were defeated, they felt they were betrayed. There were no Allied armies in Berlin, there was an armistice. And then Versailles punished them. So how far back do we go? Do we go back to, stopping the rise of empires? Do we go back to stopping Rome? And the whole topic of empires and the human inclination to form empires, the inclination for elites to take to control is, of course, a topic for another video. So no, I'm not anti-war or pacifist per se. I'd simply rather there were, should we say, no wars would be ideal, but actually, can we even say that? Because the question becomes, what would it take to end war? For example, a scenario that will be familiar to a lot of us is if there was one world government with perfect surveillance and perfect control and a perfectly obedient citizenry, there'd be no need for war. Do we want to have that be the world human condition? I think that there's a lot of us that think, well, no thanks. One elite being in charge of everything, with having all the power, all the control, and no freedom other than the freedom to be obedient. That's not exactly a desirable outcome. So if war would prevent that, well, maybe that's what you might call a just war. And of course, the just war is always on the side that you happen to be typically born into. Just like the right religion is the religion you tend to be born into. And so we come to the other topic, which is agendas. And that is, again, worth a whole host of videos in its own right. But simply put, an agenda, as I define it, is where one group of people, maybe small, maybe large, believe they are entitled, because they are right, to have things their way. And so anyone that challenges their agenda is obviously wrong, and again, they need to be obedient to the agenda or they're the enemy. And the interesting thing is that I would say every human has at least 5 or 6 agendas that they take for granted without even thinking of them as agendas. And they will be very familiar to you, just to name a few. You are born to a race. You have a religion. Even if you don't believe in that religion, there will be one that you grew up within. You have an economic system. So that's 3 already. And those are inevitable. But then what about the other agendas that are invented? We've touched on race. What about feminism? What about pro-life? What about green? Any time that you decide that I'm on the side of right, me and my friends, I and my friends, we're on the side of right, you're wrong, that's an agenda. Now, if it's just an opinion, well, everyone's entitled to an opinion. We have opinions in fact, it's not even entitled. We have opinions whether we like it or not. And they are sacrosanct from I am, as I put it. I am, the observation that everything comes ultimately into our brains. We're all going to have opinions. But what sets an agenda apart is it is then used to cross free will. Cross free will means interfering in another person's life, interfering in another person's free will. So an agenda in my book is where a group of people say, we're right, you're wrong, and here's the key part, here's what we're going to do about it. And we've all seen in the social media the kind of aggression between groups, whether it's pro-life, feminist, Black Lives Matter, Republican, Democrat, COVID, Russia, the war, Ukraine. Any of these agendas, they promote strife, they promote disagreement, and they are used as an excuse to interfere in other people's lives. So I'm very much anti-agenda, and that gets me into trouble because I try, if I see somebody's post that starts blaming someone else, then I might be put on a comment to point out there's another perspective and a contrasting perspective, which is why, well, we won't go into it, but let's just say that that tends to get some people's backs up. So I'm very much anti-agenda, and in fact I would encourage you, we all know that watching mainstream news is dangerous to your health, but I would suggest that buying into any agenda ultimately is injurious both to the person and to the group and the groups on either side. And it's an interesting question, who actually benefits from agendas? Ultimately, that anger, that mob, that mass emotion is put to use by somebody who ultimately gets to take advantage of it and implement a policy based on it. And guess what? That is rarely to our advantage, because sooner or later one of the agendas is going to find you on the wrong side. So, just a short video that no, I'm not anti-war. I'm pro-sanity, pro-fair, and pro-understanding what is going on so that we can make an informed decision as to where we stand on any particular issue.